I remember that day so vividly. It still sends a tremor through my chest whenever I think about it. The morning light was soft, spilling across my living room floor, touching the worn edges of the family photos on the mantel, the ones I couldn't quite bring myself to take down, even after all the pain they caused. I was sitting in my armchair, knitting the same scarf I'd been working on for months, my mind wandering between prayers and memories, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I thought it was the mailman at first, but then came the slam of 2 car doors, heavy, familiar. I froze. Through the lace curtains I saw them, my son, David, and behind him, his wife, Vanessa. They stood there with their suitcases, the same ones they'd packed so proudly when they moved out 2 years ago, saying they needed space, saying they were tired of my rules, saying I was too controlling, and now, there they were, back. For a long moment I didn't move. My knitting needles slipped from my hands. My breath came in shallow, disbelieving gasps. I hadn't seen my son in almost a year, not since the day he accused me of ruining his marriage. But here he was, standing on my porch, his eyes cast low. And Vanessa, looking anywhere but at me. When I finally opened the door, I didn't know what to say. The sight of them, the tension in their shoulders, the look of desperation in their faces. It was almost too much. "Mom," David said quietly, his voice breaking. "Can we come in?" I stood there, gripping the doorknob, feeling the ghosts of every sleepless night I'd spent crying over that boy. I should have slammed the door. I should have told them to take their mess somewhere else. But a mother's heart is a foolish thing. Even after all the betrayal, it still hopes, still forgives, still aches to hold her child again. So I stepped aside. They came in, dragging their suitcases across my hardwood floor, the sound echoing like thunder in that quiet house. It felt strange, seeing Vanessa there again. She looked thinner, pale, her once perfectly styled hair tied back in a limp ponytail. David had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes hung loosely on him. They didn't look like the proud couple who'd left my home laughing 2 years ago. They looked broken. I gestured toward the couch. "Sit," I said softly. They obeyed, their eyes darting around the room as if they were seeing it for the first time. Finally, David spoke. "Mom, we don't have anywhere else to go." My heart clenched. "What do you mean?" Vanessa looked down at her hands. "We lost the apartment. He lost his job. And She hesitated, glancing at David. "Things have been rough. That word carried so much weight. I looked at my son. "David, what happened?" He rubbed his forehead. "It's a long story, Mom. We made some mistakes. We just need a place to stay for a while." For a while. I felt the words twist in my stomach. Part of me wanted to tell them no. After everything that happened, after the things Vanessa said to me, the lies she spread, how could I let her back into my home? But then I saw the way David's hands trembled, the way he couldn't meet my eyes. So I did what mothers do. I said yes, even when my heart screamed no. "All right," I said quietly. "You can stay. But just until you get back on your feet." David exhaled in relief. Vanessa nodded quickly, her eyes filling with tears. I walked to the guest room, dusted off the sheets, and made the bed with the same care I used to when David was a little boy. As I tucked in the corners, my hands shook. It wasn't just the years of arthritis. It was the weight of all the memories, the way they'd left, the way my son had looked at me that day, cold and distant, as if I were a stranger. That night, as they settled in, I stood by the window watching the moonlight pour over the yard. Something didn't feel right. There was a tension in the air, a quiet unease I couldn't name, but I pushed it away. Told myself not to be paranoid. Told myself it was enough that my son was home, safe. I didn't know then that this homecoming would become a storm that nearly destroyed me. The next morning, I woke early to the sound of whispers. At first, I thought it was the radio. But as I walked down the hall, I heard Vanessa's voice, sharp, urgent. "I told you, we can't tell her yet." Then David's, low and angry. "She'll find out eventually." "She always does." I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. I shouldn't have listened, but something in their tone, that secretive hush, made my stomach twist. I stepped closer, just enough to catch Vanessa's next words. If she finds out now, she'll never agree to help us. Just keep it together until we get what we need. My breath caught. Get what they need? I leaned back against the wall, suddenly cold all over. My fingers tightened around the edge of my robe. I wanted to burst in, demand an explanation, but I didn't. I waited. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. I rushed quietly back to the kitchen and began pretending to pour coffee. When they entered, both smiled, too quickly. Too forced. "Morning, Mom," David said as if nothing had happened. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. "Did you two sleep well?" "Like babies," Vanessa said. I looked at her. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were calculating. I didn't say anything. I just handed her a cup of coffee and watched the steam rise between us, hiding our true thoughts. That day passed in uneasy silence. David went out to look for work, though he didn't say where. Vanessa stayed behind, scrolling on her phone, pretending to help me with chores. When evening came, I made dinner. Chicken stew, the way David used to love it as a boy. We sat around the table, trying to talk like a family again. But every word felt rehearsed. Every smile, hollow. After dinner, Vanessa offered to do the dishes. I was surprised, but I didn't argue. I went to the living room, sat down with my Bible, and tried to pray. But halfway through a verse, I heard a sound that froze me. The soft click of a drawer in the kitchen. That drawer only held one thing: my late husband's checkbook. I rose quietly and peeked into the kitchen. Vanessa stood there, the checkbook in her hands. Her eyes darted toward the hallway as if she thought I wouldn't see. I took a step forward. "What are you doing with that?" She jumped, slamming the drawer shut. "Oh! I was just tidying up, I swear." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. They were steady, cold. I didn't believe her for a second, but I said nothing. "Not yet. All right," I said softly. "Just be careful with that drawer. Those are old papers." She nodded too fast. "Of course, Mom." I turned away, heart pounding, the air heavy with suspicion. Something was happening. Something I didn't yet understand. But one thing was clear. My son and his wife hadn't come home out of love. They'd come back for something else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the darkness, listening to the faint creak of footsteps moving around my house. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of wind against the window, the slow turning of a doorknob somewhere down the hall. My heart thudded hard in my chest. Something wasn't right. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that it was natural to be uneasy after everything that had happened between us. But the way Vanessa had clutched that checkbook, the look in her eyes, it kept replaying in my mind like a warning. Around midnight, I heard voices again. "You need to calm down," Vanessa hissed. "I am calm," David whispered back. "But we can't stay here forever. What if she starts asking questions?" "She won't," Vanessa said. "You know how gullible she is. Just smile and act grateful. We'll be gone before she realizes anything." I felt the blood drain from my face. Before she realizes anything. What did that mean? I wanted to burst into their room and demand the truth, but I forced myself to stay still. I needed to know what they were after before confronting them. I needed proof. So I waited. The next morning, I decided to test them. Over breakfast, I smiled and said, "You know, I've been thinking about updating my will." The reaction was instant. Vanessa froze mid-bite, her fork hovering in the air. David blinked quickly and forced a laugh. "Why would you bring that up, Mom?" "Oh, just getting older, that's all," I said casually. "You two are my only family now. I want to make sure everything goes to the right place." Vanessa's eyes gleamed for a split second, just a flash, before she looked down at her plate. "That's thoughtful of you," she said, her tone dripping with false modesty. I sipped my coffee, pretending not to notice. Inside, my stomach churned, so that was it. They hadn't come home because they loved me. They came because they thought I was dying. Over the next few days, I watched them closely. David spent his time job hunting, which I later discovered meant disappearing for hours with no explanation. Vanessa, on the other hand, stayed glued to her phone or hovered near me, pretending to help with chores while trying to peek at my mail, my drawers, even my medicine cabinet. She thought I didn't notice. But I saw it all, every whisper, every sidelong glance, every fake smile. Still, I said nothing. I needed to see how far they were willing to go. One afternoon, I got a call from my friend Mabel. Bless her heart. She'd been checking on me ever since my surgery last year. "Clara, honey, I saw your son in town earlier," she said. He was with some man in a suit. Looked serious. "You all right?" My hand trembled as I held the phone. "What kind of man?" "White fellow, glasses, briefcase." "Maybe a lawyer?" A cold chill slid down my spine. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there for a long while, my heart racing. A lawyer? What business did David have with a lawyer? Later that evening, when David came home, I pretended not to know. He acted normal, too normal, asking about dinner, complimenting the stew, avoiding my eyes. But I saw the edge of a folded paper sticking out of his jacket pocket. When he went to take a shower, I quietly walked into the guest room. His jacket lay on the chair. My hands trembled as I pulled the paper out. It was a printed form, something called a power of attorney. My name was written on it. David's name was listed as my legal representative, and the signature line, mine, was blank. I pressed a hand to my mouth, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely breathe. They weren't just here to manipulate me. They wanted control over everything. My bank account, my house, my life. I hid the paper back exactly as I found it and retreated to my room. I sat there in silence, gripping the cross necklace I'd worn since my husband passed. For years, I'd told myself that no matter how far David drifted, he was still my boy. That someday, he'd realize all the sacrifices I made for him. The nights I stayed up working 2 jobs. The years I went without so he could have a better life. But staring into that darkness, I realized something I never wanted to believe. My son wasn't lost. He'd chosen this and Vanessa. She was the wind pushing him down that path. The next day, I decided to play dumb. At breakfast, I smiled sweetly and said, "David, I think it's time I get my paperwork in order. Maybe you can help me with that?" His eyes lit up, the way a child's might when you promise them candy. "Of course, Mom. That's a great idea." Vanessa nearly dropped her spoon. "Yes, we can definitely help with that. I know some people who can make it simple for you." "Oh, that's wonderful," I said softly. "But we'll do it my way." They smiled, but I could see their teeth grinding behind those fake grins. That evening, I visited Pastor Williams at the church. I'd known that man since David was 10, and I trusted him like a brother. I told him everything. He listened quietly, hands folded, brow furrowed. "Clara," he said finally, "you need to protect yourself. Don't sign a thing until you've had someone else look at it. A lawyer of your choosing." I nodded, tears filling my eyes. "I just don't understand, Pastor. How could my own son do this to me?" He sighed deeply. "The love of money can make even good people lose their way. But you're wise, Clara. Don't let them see your fear." I left his office feeling both shaken and stronger. I knew what I had to do. That night I returned home and found the 2 of them whispering again in the kitchen. "She's going to do it," Vanessa said, smirking. "I told you. She's easier to manipulate than you think." David chuckled. "Yeah, once that paper's signed, we'll move everything over. Then we can sell the house, pay off the debt, and be free. Sell the house. The house my husband and I built from scratch. The house where I'd raised my son." I felt something in me snap. Quietly, I stepped back into the hallway before they could see me. My hands were shaking, my chest tight. I wanted to scream, to throw them out right then and there, but I remembered Pastor's words. Don't show your fear. So instead, I smiled the next morning. I cooked their favorite breakfast, pancakes and sausage, and acted as though nothing had changed. But inside, I was making plans. 2 days later, I told them I had an appointment with a lawyer friend of mine to finalize the paperwork. They both looked thrilled. "That's great, Mom," David said. "We'll come with you, make sure everything's clear." "Oh, no need," I said, waving my hand. "I can handle it. I'll bring the papers back for you to look over." Vanessa's smile faltered. "Oh, well, all right then." As soon as they left the house that afternoon, I drove straight to Pastor William's nephew, a real lawyer named Greg. I handed him the copy of the power of attorney form I'd found. He read it once and let out a low whistle. "Mrs. James, if you'd signed this, your son would have had full control over your estate. He could have sold everything without your consent." My heart clenched. "That's what I was afraid of," Greg nodded. "You did the right thing bringing it here. I'll draft something to protect you, a legal safeguard. That way, even if they try something, they won't get far." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of relief. When I got home, they were sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV. The moment I walked in, Vanessa jumped up. "So, how did it go?" "Oh, fine," I said, setting down my purse. "The lawyer was very thorough. I just have to sign a few things next week." "That's wonderful, Mom," David said. "We can go with you to—" "No need," I interrupted gently, meeting his eyes. He said it's a private matter. For a moment, the room went silent. Then Vanessa forced a smile and sat down again, though her jaw twitched ever so slightly. That night, I caught Vanessa in the hallway, standing by the phone. She was whispering to someone. "I don't care what it takes," she said. "We need the money. If she doesn't sign, we'll find another way." I stepped out of the shadows. "Find another way to do what, Vanessa?" She spun around, eyes wide. I was talking to my sister." I raised an eyebrow. "Your sister's been in rehab for 3 months." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Go to bed," I said softly, but the warning in my tone was clear. "We'll talk in the morning." She nodded quickly and hurried down the hall. I stood there long after she was gone, gripping the banister until my knuckles went white. This was no longer just a test of patience. It was war, and I was done playing nice. I woke before sunrise the next morning, the air still heavy and cold. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the helpless old woman they thought I was. I felt alert, steady, as if the Lord himself had nudged me awake and whispered, "Now, Clara, it's your turn." I brewed my coffee in silence, watching the first light slide across the floorboards. In that pale glow, I saw the scratches on the wood from when David used to race his toy cars as a boy. I remembered the sound of his laughter echoing through the hall. Back then, he'd look up at me with those big brown eyes and say, "I'm gonna take care of you when I'm grown, Mama." How easily promises crumble. By 8 o'clock, the house was alive with the sound of Vanessa's footsteps. She breezed into the kitchen wearing one of her silk robes, smiling like she owned the place. "Good morning, Mom," she sang out. I didn't answer right away. I was studying her, the way she looked through the cupboards as though searching for something. Then she spotted my purse on the table. "Need help balancing your checkbook again?" She asked lightly, as if she hadn't been caught snooping through it before. "I think I'll manage," I said. "I'm not as forgetful as you think." She laughed too loudly. "Of course not, Mom." But her eyes flicked back to the purse. And right then, I decided it was time to start my own little game. I waited until she stepped outside to water the plants, then opened the drawer beside the fridge and slid a small digital recorder inside. My pastor's nephew Greg had given it to me the night before. "Just in case," he'd said. "If they're planning something, you'll need proof." My hands shook as I pressed the record button. I'd never spied on anyone in my life, but this wasn't ordinary family business anymore. This was survival. That afternoon, while they were out, I checked the device. 3 hours of audio. When I played it back, my stomach turned. Vanessa's voice, sharp and bitter. "She's hiding something, I know it. Maybe she already signed something behind our backs. David, Then we'll make her sign again. I can forge her signature if I have to. Silence. Then Vanessa again, lower, colder. If she finds out, she'll cut us off. We can't let that happen, David. Not after everything we've done. I paused the recording, my hands trembling. Everything we've done. What did that mean? That night, when they returned, I acted perfectly normal. I served roast chicken, poured sweet tea, and even laughed at David's small talk about the weather. But my mind was spinning. Halfway through dinner, Vanessa looked at me and said, "Mom, I was thinking, maybe we could help you with your mail from now on. You shouldn't have to worry about bills and things at your age." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, honey, that's so kind of you. But I already called the bank earlier. They're sending my statements directly to me now. Private delivery." Her fork stopped midair. "Private delivery?" I said, still smiling. "It's safer that way." She forced a laugh, but I saw the panic flicker in her eyes. The days that followed were a strange dance. They smiled at me. I smiled back. They plotted. I listened. They thought they were clever. But they didn't realize I had a whole community behind me now. Pastor Williams checked on me daily, and Greg, the lawyer, was preparing the paperwork that would ensure every penny I owned stayed locked where it belonged. Still, I needed to know what Vanessa meant by everything we've done. My answer came sooner than I expected. One evening, David's phone rang while he was in the shower. I shouldn't have looked, but the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Marcus R. The message preview said, "We need that signature by Friday, or I'm going to the police." My breath caught. Police? When David came out whistling, I handed him the phone. "You got a message, baby." He looked down, and all the color drained from his face. "Oh, that's nothing. Just a friend." But his hands were shaking. After he went to bed, I sat in my chair for hours, thinking. There was something darker at play, something even Vanessa might be hiding from him. The next morning, I made up my mind to follow her. When she said she was going shopping, I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my coat, and slipped out the back door. I drove my old Buick down the hill, far enough to stay unseen, but close enough to watch where she went. She didn't go shopping. She went to a pawn shop on Maple Street. I parked across the road, peering through the windshield. She handed a small velvet pouch to the clerk. He opened it, then disappeared into the back. When he returned, he gave her an envelope thick with cash. My chest tightened. That pouch looked familiar. When I got home, I went straight to my jewelry box. Empty. My husband's wedding ring, the one I'd kept beside my own for 20 years, was gone. Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced them back. If I confronted her too soon, I'd lose my chance to expose both of them. That night, I pretended everything was fine. I even asked Vanessa to help me bake cornbread for Sunday service. "You always make it so fluffy," I said. Her vanity couldn't resist the compliment. "Of course, Mom," she said, smiling proudly. While she worked the batter, I slipped the recorder into the spice rack above her head. An hour later, when I checked the device again, it captured their full conversation. Vanessa: "I pawned the ring today. Got enough to cover Marcus." David: "He's still threatening you?" Vanessa: "He says if we don't pay him, he'll tell your mother what we did." David: "Then we better get that paper signed fast." My heart stopped. I replayed it twice just to be sure. Whatever they'd done, it wasn't just greed. It was criminal. I called Greg first thing in the morning and told him everything. He asked me to come by the office, but I told him I wasn't ready yet. I had a plan, a dangerous one, but it was the only way to make them confess outright. That evening, I waited until dinner was nearly over. Then I said calmly, "You know, I was talking to my lawyer again today. Both of them froze. David cleared his throat. Oh? What about? Well, I said, pretending to think. He mentioned something strange. He said someone tried to access my savings account last week. Vanessa's fork clattered onto her plate. What? That's ridiculous. Yes, I said, my tone cool. He said the bank flagged an online attempt under your name, Vanessa. Odd, isn't it? Her mouth opened, then closed. Must be a mistake. Of course, I said, smiling. I told him the same thing. The silence that followed was thick as fog. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time since they'd arrived. I didn't sleep much. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again, soft, careful ones, moving toward my room. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then stopped. I held my breath until the steps faded away. The next morning, I found fresh scratches on the lock. That was the final straw. I packed a small bag, tucked the recorder and all my evidence inside, and drove straight to Greg's office. Together, we took everything to the police station. Detective Harris, a kind older woman with tired eyes, listened carefully. When she heard the recordings, she leaned back in her chair and said, Mrs. James, you've just saved yourself from being scammed out of your entire estate. I felt my knees weaken. So, what happens now? She smiled faintly. Let's see how far they'll go when they think you're still in the dark. 2 days later, I returned home acting cheerful as ever. I talked to the lawyer again, I told them. He said I need to bring all my documents tomorrow morning so he can finalize everything. Vanessa beamed. That's great, Mom. David clapped his hands. Finally. I pretended to forget my purse on the counter, knowing they'd look inside the moment I left the room. Sure enough, when I peeked around the corner, Vanessa was rifling through it. She pulled out the dummy envelope Greg had prepared. Fake. Paperwork stamped power of attorney. And whispered, This is it. They took pictures of the pages, laughing softly. I walked back in just as they tucked it away. Find what you were looking for? I asked sweetly. Vanessa jumped. Oh, I was just, checking the grocery list. I said. I'm sure you were. They didn't know every move was now being watched by the police through hidden cameras Greg's team had placed earlier that day. The next morning, I told them I was heading to my appointment. I left the house. At 9, parked a few streets away, and waited with Detective Harris and 2 officers in an unmarked car. At 10, David and Vanessa stepped outside, talking quickly, carrying a folder. They climbed into their car and drove off, straight to the local bank. Inside, they handed the teller forged documents with my name on them. 10 minutes later, the officers walked in after them. When they emerged, handcuffed and pale, I felt something inside me finally release, a mix of heartbreak and relief. David looked around, confused, and then he saw me standing across the street. Mom? He shouted. Mom, what is this? I didn't move. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across that parking lot. Then I said quietly, It's called consequences, son. That evening, after everything settled, Detective Harris came by with the final report. They'll be charged with fraud, attempted forgery, and theft, she said. It's a serious case. I nodded, tears in my eyes. I never wanted this. I just wanted my boy back. She put a gentle hand on my shoulder. Sometimes, Mrs. James, love means letting justice do the loving for you. When she left, the house felt heavier than ever. Quiet. Empty. I walked into David's old room and sat on the edge of his bed, running my fingers over the quilt I'd made for him when he was 10. How did we get here? When did love turn into something like this? I wanted to believe he'd been blinded by Vanessa, that he wasn't truly lost. but deep down I knew he'd made his choice. Still, a mother's heart never stops hoping. Later that night, as I made myself a cup of tea, the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. It was the county jail. "Mrs. James," a guard said, "your son's asking to speak with you." My hand shook. "Put him through." There was a click, then silence, and finally his voice. Small, broken. "Mom, I'm sorry." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. "I know you are, baby. She said it was just temporary, that we'd pay it back." "I didn't think—" "I know," I whispered. "But thinking comes before doing. That's what you forgot." He started to cry. "Can you forgive me?" My heart ached. "I already have, but forgiveness doesn't erase what's done. You need to face it now." The line went quiet. Then he said, barely above a whisper, "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, David," I said. "More than you'll ever know." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the steaming mug in my hands. The house was still, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't just a broken old woman anymore. I was a survivor. I thought that was the end of it. But a week later, just as I began to breathe again, I received a letter, no return address. Inside was a single line written in Vanessa's handwriting. "You think it's over? Clara, but you don't know the whole story."
The next morning, I woke up with an ache in my chest that had nothing to do with age. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared out the window at the gray dawn creeping over the garden. The roses my husband had planted were wilting, just like the trust I once had for the people under my roof. David and Vanessa moved around the house like restless ghosts, pretending everything was normal, but the way they avoided my eyes told me they knew I was starting to suspect something. Still, I kept my calm. I'd learned in life that silence can be far louder than shouting. By noon, I had a plan. I called my friend Mabel again and asked if she could stop by that evening. "Bring your phone," I whispered, "and don't tell anyone you're coming." She chuckled. "You sound like you're plotting something, Clara." "I suppose I am," I said softly. It's time they learned not to take me for a fool. The rest of the day, I played my role like a weary old woman. I smiled when they smiled, asked about their plans, and even let Vanessa convince me to take a walk while she tidied up the living room. I knew what she was doing. The moment I stepped outside, she'd start snooping again, so I left a little surprise for her. I placed a sealed envelope on the kitchen table with the words, "To be opened upon my death," written in bold red ink. Inside was nothing but a folded note that said, "You'll find what you deserve but not what you expected." Then I left. When I returned an hour later, the envelope was gone. Vanessa's fake smile greeted me at the door. "You're back early." I was just unmaking tea. "Wonderful," I said, taking off my coat. "Did anything interesting happen while I was out?" Her lips tightened. "Of course not." I smiled faintly. "Good." That evening, Mabel arrived right on time. I met her at the door, handed her a small recording device I'd borrowed from Greg, and whispered, "Stay quiet and follow my lead." We went into the living room, where David and Vanessa were pretending to watch television. "Oh, David," I began sweetly. "I told Mabel all about the new papers we're signing next week. She's so happy for us." David's head snapped up. "You what?" Mabel smiled innocently. "Yes, dear. Clara says you're helping her get everything settled for when she passes. That's mighty kind of you." Vanessa's smile stiffened. "Of course. Family helps family." "Indeed," I said, "and I thought it might be good to talk about what happens after. You know, make sure everyone understands." The air in the room grew heavy. David shifted in his seat. "Mom, maybe this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time," I said. "After all, you've already been meeting with lawyers, haven't you?" The blood drained from his face. How did you don't?" I interrupted. "I know everything. The forms, the whispers, the lies." Vanessa stood up, eyes flashing. "You went through our things." I protected myself. I said sharply, "Something you too clearly forgot how to do, respect your own mother." The room went still. Then David spoke, voice low and trembling. "You don't understand, Mom. We were desperate. Desperate enough to steal from me." My voice cracked. "Desperate enough to sell your father's house behind my back." He looked down, shame flickering across his face. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Oh please, don't act innocent, David. She's been hoarding money for years while we were drowning. Maybe she owes us." My mouth fell open. Owes you, yes, Vanessa shouted, her face twisted with rage. You think you're some saint because you raised him alone? You didn't give him a life, Clara, you controlled it. You used guilt like a leash. Well, guess what? We're done playing your game. David winced. Vanessa, stop. No, she spat. She needs to hear it. You think you're the victim, but you've been manipulating him his whole life. I took a slow breath. If I was manipulating him, he wouldn't be standing beside a woman who talks to me like that in my own home. Mabel quietly reached into her bag and tapped her phone, recording every word. Vanessa turned red. You're unbelievable, she hissed. We tried to help you. We came back because we thought you needed us. I laughed softly, not out of joy, but disbelief. You came back because you thought I was dying. Because you wanted to get your hands on what little I have left. David rubbed his temples. Mom, please, let's not do this. Then tell me the truth, I said, staring him down. Were you planning to sell this house? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. That night, they locked themselves in their room. I heard them arguing, muffled but tense. She's not going to sign anything now, Vanessa hissed. Then we'll make her, David said darkly, one way or another. A chill ran through me. I pressed a hand to my chest, whispering a silent prayer. They were beyond reasoning now. They were cornered animals, and cornered animals can be dangerous. The next morning, I called Greg and told him what had happened. He told me to come to his office immediately. When I went, he handed me a folder. I drew up an emergency protection order. He said, if they try to forge anything or take action without your consent, it's a federal offense. And I've already notified the county clerk about the power of attorney attempt. I nodded slowly. So they can't touch my assets. Not without facing prison time, he said firmly. A wave of relief washed over me. Thank you, Greg, for everything. He smiled. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Mrs. James. Just keep your distance from them until we get this filed. I will, I promised. But deep down, I knew I couldn't just run. This was my home, and I wasn't leaving it in their hands. That night, things took a darker turn. I was in bed reading when I smelled something strange, faint, bitter, like burning plastic. I got up and went to the kitchen. There, I found a small pot left on the stove, its contents bubbling black. Vanessa stood nearby, holding a towel. Oh, you scared me, she said quickly. I was making tea and forgot it. Her smile was too wide, too careful. I nodded slowly. That's fine, dear. Be more careful next time. I turned and walked away, but I didn't miss the way her hands trembled. The following day, Mabel came by again, pretending to deliver homemade cookies. While she chatted with Vanessa in the living room, I slipped quietly into their room. Inside, I found something that made my heart stop. A folder, half hidden under Vanessa's purse. Inside it, copies of my bank statements, insurance policy, and a note written in Vanessa's handwriting. Once she signs, transfer funds immediately. Use joint account. I took pictures of everything with my phone. Just as I was slipping the folder back, the door creaked open. Vanessa stood there, her smile icy. Looking for something, Clara? I turned slowly, just checking the window. You left it open. She stepped closer. You know, it's rude to invade people's privacy, and it's criminal to steal from your family, I said softly. Her expression hardened. You think you're clever, but you don't understand how the world works anymore. You sit here with your old morals and think people will take care of you out of kindness. Wake up, Clara. People take what they can. Not from me, I said, meeting her eyes. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, two women who saw the truth in each other's faces, one willing to destroy for greed, and one willing to fight for what was right. Then I walked out, leaving her seething. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life. I sat in the dark, holding my husband's photograph. You'd know what to do, I whispered. You always did. And maybe it was my imagination, but I could almost hear his voice, calm, steady, reassuring. Stand firm, Clara. They've already lost the moment they stooped this low. Tears filled my eyes. I whispered a quiet thank you and drifted into uneasy sleep. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Too much silence. When I stepped out of my room, the house was empty. Their suitcases were gone. My heart raced. Had they fled? Then I saw the envelope on the table. It said, "We're taking what's ours. Don't try to stop us." I tore it open. Inside was my checkbook, torn in half, and a single ATM receipt showing they'd withdrawn $5,000 from my account. I felt dizzy. No, I whispered. They didn't. I grabbed my phone and called the bank, voice trembling. The teller confirmed it. They'd used my spare debit card, the one I'd hidden in the kitchen drawer. They knew everything. I hung up, shaking. Anger, grief, and betrayal surged all at once. But underneath it all was something stronger: determination. If they thought I was done, they were wrong. I picked up the phone and called Greg. "They stole from me," I said. "I have proof, and I want to press charges." There was a pause on the line. Then his steady voice: "Good. Let's make sure they can't hurt you again." By evening, I had filed a police report and handed over all the evidence: the recordings, the photos, the documents. Mabel sat beside me as I watched the sun dip below the trees. "You did the right thing, Clara," she said softly. "I just never thought it would come to this," I whispered. "Turning my own son in." She squeezed my hand. "You didn't turn him in. You showed him that actions have consequences. Maybe it's the only thing that'll make him see." I nodded slowly, though my heart ached. That night, I sat alone in the quiet house. Every creak and whisper reminded me of them. Part of me wanted to forgive, to hope they'd return and say they were sorry. But another part, the part that had endured too many broken promises, knew better. I stared at the front door, half expecting it to open again, and somehow, I had a feeling it would.
Days passed. Then weeks. The police investigation moved faster than I'd expected. Greg had done everything by the book. He'd submitted the recordings, the bank withdrawal logs, even the forged power of attorney draft. I didn't have to lift a finger. Still, I barely slept. I'd lie in bed, the quiet hum of the night pressing down on me, and I'd picture my son, my baby boy, sitting in some motel room, hiding from the law with the woman he'd chosen over his own conscience. Sometimes I'd imagine him crying. Other times I'd imagine him laughing at me, thinking I'd never dare go this far. And every time, I'd whisper to the ceiling, "You brought this on yourself, David, not me." A week later, a police officer knocked on my door. "Mrs. James," he said gently, removing his cap. "We found your son and his wife." My throat tightened. "Where?" He hesitated. "They were staying at a motel on the highway. We recovered your missing funds and several falsified documents. They're both in custody now. You'll be notified about the hearing." For a moment I couldn't speak. My knees wobbled, and I had to grab the doorframe to steady myself. The officer's tone softened. "Do you want to press full charges?" I stared at him, my heart twisting. I thought about the nights I'd rocked that boy to sleep, the days I'd worked double shifts to keep a roof over his head, the Christmas mornings when I'd saved pennies just to buy him one toy that made him smile. And then I thought about how easily he'd tried to erase me. "Yes," I said quietly. "Press them," he nodded. "Understood." When he left, I stood there alone, staring at the closed door, and I felt something deep inside me break, not loudly, but softly, like a bone that had carried too much weight for too long. The news spread quickly around town. Mabel came over the next morning with her eyes wide and voice trembling. "Lord have mercy, Clara, I saw it on the bulletin." "They're calling it elder fraud," I sighed. "That's what it is, Mabel." She looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "You think he'll learn from this?" I stared out the window. "I think he'll have no choice." The weeks that followed were a strange mix of grief and relief. I'd walk through the house and find little traces of them everywhere. A forgotten hairbrush, an empty coffee mug, David's old jacket hanging by the door. Every item told a story, and not all of them were cruel. There had been good years once, years full of laughter, hope, and love. It's funny how memories can turn into ghosts when the people tied to them change. Still, I refused to let bitterness take root. I poured my energy into small things: baking for the church, tending the garden, fixing the squeaky porch swing that David had once helped me build. I told myself that if I kept moving, the pain would move with me, quieter, lighter. But life has a way of testing that resolve. About 3 months later, the hearing came. The courthouse was cold and gray, the kind of place where voices echoed like secrets. I sat quietly on the bench, my hands folded in my lap, while David and Vanessa were led into the room in matching orange jumpsuits. He looked thinner, older. And when his eyes met mine, for just a second, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: shame. The judge read out the charges: financial fraud, attempted forgery, identity theft. Every word felt like another nail sealing the coffin of the boy I once knew. When it was my turn to speak, the judge asked softly, "Mrs. James, do you wish to address the defendants?" I stood, legs trembling, and turned toward them. "David," I said, my voice cracking, "I don't know where I went wrong. I raised you to be honest, to be kind, and I thought maybe I gave you too much love. Maybe I made it too easy for you to think I'd always forgive anything." He wouldn't meet my eyes. I took a shaky breath. "You stole from me. You lied to me. And you nearly destroyed the home your father built with his hands. But the worst part is, you made me doubt that I ever knew the man I gave birth to." Vanessa scoffed under her breath. The judge shot her a warning glare. I ignored her and continued. "I won't beg for your apology because I don't think you're ready to give it. But I will say this. You can lose money, you can lose property, but when you lose your soul, there's no getting it back." The courtroom fell silent. I turned away before he could see the tears that had started to fall. They were sentenced to 2 years, reduced for cooperation. 2 years to think about everything they'd done. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse feeling empty, like someone had scooped out the center of my chest. Mabel was waiting outside, her arms open. "You did the right thing, Clara." "Then why does it hurt so much?" I whispered. "Because doing the right thing always costs something," she said gently. "But peace is worth the price." For a while, peace seemed like a foreign language. I tried to settle back into routine, but every morning when the sun hit the kitchen table, I'd remember those last breakfasts, the fake smiles, the hollow, "I love you, Mom," that now echoed in my head like a curse. One day, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, just my name in handwriting I recognized instantly. It was from David. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me." Vanessa made her choices and I made mine. I thought I was fixing things for us, but I ended up breaking everything instead. You were right. I let greed blind me. I don't know what kind of man that makes me, but I want to be better. Not for Vanessa. Not for anyone else. Just for me. And for you. If you never write back, I'll understand. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. David, I stared at that letter for a long time, tears dripping onto the paper. I wanted to burn it. I wanted to hug it. I wanted to throw it away. And yet I folded it carefully and tucked it into my Bible. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean trust. Sometimes it just means you stop letting the wound bleed. Months passed again. The seasons shifted. The garden bloomed brighter than ever that spring, as if life was reminding me that beauty could still come after ruin. One warm afternoon, as I sat on the porch sipping tea, I saw a familiar figure walking down the dusty road. My heart skipped. It was David, thinner, older, but clean-cut. No Vanessa beside him. He stopped at the gate, eyes downcast. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed to say no, but something deeper, something older than pride, made me nod. He walked up the steps slowly, like a man approaching a grave. When he reached me, he took off his cap and said softly, "She left me." I nodded. "I'm not surprised," he laughed sadly. "Yeah, neither am I." For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and fragile. Then he said, "I just wanted to tell you, I got a job at the auto shop in town. I'm trying, Mom. I really am." I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the boy who used to bring me wildflowers and say, "Don't cry. Mama, I'll always take care of you." Maybe he'd lost that boy for a while. But maybe, just maybe, he was finding him again. I nodded slowly. "That's good, David. I hope you mean it." "I do," he whispered. "I don't expect you to forget what I did." "I won't," I said. "But I'll remember that you came back." His eyes filled with tears. "You still love me?" I swallowed hard. Always. "But love doesn't mean the door's wide open." "Not yet," he nodded. "I understand." He turned to leave, but before he stepped off the porch, I said softly, "David." He looked back. "When you're ready to prove you've changed," I said, "you'll know where to find me." He smiled faintly. I already did, Mom. Then he walked away, down that same road he'd taken years ago. But this time, there was no anger in his stride. Just quiet repentance. That night, I stood by the window watching the moon cast silver light over the yard. The world was still. My heart for once was calm. I whispered a prayer, not for justice this time, but for healing. Lord, I've done my part. The rest is yours. I turned off the light and started up the stairs. Halfway up, I heard a creak behind me, soft, deliberate. I froze. The porch door, the one I'd locked, was swinging open. For a moment, I thought maybe the wind had done it. But then I saw something lying just inside the doorway, an envelope. My name written on it. In Vanessa's handwriting.